Good morning. This is Father Stephen Kelly from St. John's Church in Detroit, and we're continuing our series of daily morning meditations where we generally look at one or another of the lessons that are assigned for morning or evening prayer, what is known as the daily office lectionary. And today I wanted to look at the fourth chapter of St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, although I would make a note that's an evening prayer, but I'd make a note that we do jump a bit in morning prayer. We've jumped out of Exodus into the book of Numbers, but it's dealing with the same subject. So remember that when we go through the Old Testament, just because the Bible is ordered with particular books in order, doesn't mean that the stories themselves are sequentially. They're not chronologically sequential. Sometimes you do get bits of the story from one book and then another part of the same story or a related story from another book of the Bible. Same is true, by the way, with the New Testament. When we look at St. Paul's letters, here's a little factoid for you, is that they are not in order of timeline. They're not placed there in order of timeline. Romans and then 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, etc., etc. They're placed in the Bible by length, right? Romans is the largest of Paul's epistles, and then 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, etc. They're not placed chronologically in order. They're there by size, from largest to smallest of the ones that we know from Paul, and then Hebrews, and then the general epistles of Peter and John and James. So anyway, just a little fact for you to tuck away in the back of your brain. Maybe it'll come in useful on trivia night. Anyway, I thought we'd go to the fourth chapter because I want to talk a little bit about vocation and calling within the church. And I'll do a little jumping around during the lesson, but it's the fourth chapter. I, therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you that ye walk worthy of the vocation wherewith ye are called, with all lowliness and meekness, with long suffering, forbearing one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. And then jumping forward to verse number 11. And he gave some apostles, and some prophets, and some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come in the unity of faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we henceforth be no more children tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive, but speaking the truth in love, we grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. Okay, so first of all, we started out with what we were saying that I want you to realize that you are called to walk in the vocation God's calling you to, right? Vocar, to call, right? Vocat, he calls, right? Remember our Latin text from the good old days, right? So the word vocation is a calling, right? So God is calling you. He's calling you to follow him. He's calling you to be active in the life and the ministry of the church. And so that's why it's so important for us to think of our lives not as volunteers in the church, but as our calling, right? I'm called to the priesthood. You're called to an active lay ministry within the church and within your community, right? So it's a calling. So you should walk worthy of the vocation with lowliness and meekness and long suffering, forbearing one another in love, right? In other words, we need to learn to reflect Jesus Christ among our friends and our neighbors and among other members of the church as well. But then jumping forward a bit, so he made some of them apostles, and by extension, priests, right? And some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and teachers, right? So some of them are called to this sort of particular vocation. Why? Right? So we can build them up and make them important? No, of course not, right? Remember, we already talked about meekness and humility. The reason he does this is for the building up of the church, for the body of Christ, right? We're all called to ministry in the church. We're not all called to ordain ministry, but we're all called to share the love of God in Jesus Christ, right? Whether that's by doing the good deeds of caring for other people, right? We don't earn salvation by those good deeds. We do those good deeds because we love Jesus and we are learning to love others as we love ourselves. But also, we are learning how to love Jesus in and through other people, right? Because we're trying to reflect Jesus to them. That becomes a ministry, offering them hope, offering to pray for people, and then following up after you've prayed for them and asking them how else you can pray and rejoicing in how God has answered those prayers, right? That's our ministry to one another among many things. Right? So remember, folks, you are called. You are called to serve the living God. You are called to love him, and you are called to minister to each other. Right? We're all called to minister to each other for his sake and for the greater glory of God, not for our own building up. So thank you, St. Paul, and this letter to the Ephesians for reminding us of that. Today's Monday, beginning of a new week. And so we do have Holy Communion Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 12:15, and evening prayer Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 5 p.m. And on Thursday at 9 a.m. we have Holy Communion as well. I hope that you can join us in person for one or more of those services to worship the living God with us, and at communion to receive the Blessed Sacrament. Or you can join us online as well and offer up your prayers to God. And I hope that you have a wonderful Monday. God bless you.